can't hear anything. Right, the person on Zoom. I particularly
Hi, Ken, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, great. I can hear you as well. So that's perfect. So it's all connected. So then don't worry about the exclamation point you see there. So I can hear and see things just fine.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and mute. I'm going to mute this, and then I'm going to go prepare the packet.
Okay, I'm going to exit this meeting. While you're there, you might want to, the meeting starts in 20 minutes. So you might want to prepare, get the stuff printed and get a script or something going, getting your commissioner names plugged in. You want me to do that so I can show you what it looks like?
Can you please?
Yeah, go ahead and get the copies printed, okay?
Yes. What did you say?
Go ahead and get the copies printed.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
p.m. Could we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Blake,
Here.
Commissioner Cordaway,
Present.
Commissioner Moore,
Here.
Vice Chair Walter, Chair Folks.
Here. Excellent. We have a full house today. In your packets, we have the April 27th minutes. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to look through them. Are there any additions or corrections?
I have none. None.
None. All right. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion to move the minutes on April 27th, 2022.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Excellent. All right, we have oral communications reserved for individuals wishing to address the board on matters of community interest not listed on the agenda. I do not see any community members here except people are on the agenda. So assuming we don't have any. So we'll move on to board staff announcements.
If I can quickly introduce our new planning administrative analyst, Ken Ramirez. He's helping out with some clerking duties as well. So thank you, Ken. And Dusty will actually be leaving the city. So this will be the last time that you are seeing her. Then with regard to items on the agenda, just disclosing to the board that the Plan Commission at its last meeting did approve the 2 applications to allow relocation of the folk Victorian house in 1940 Hamilton immediately next door to the First Congregational Church of San Jose property for use as their administrative office. So they will be at some point submitting applications and permits for the relocation, and will advise the board of when that will take place.
Great. Anything from board members? Any announcements?
I have a question. Can you give us an update on the status of the 3 Mills Act contracts?
They've been signed by city manager, blessed by the clerk and the city attorney, and are ready to go. So I'm hoping to make a run out to the clerk's county clerk recorder's office either this week or early next week.
I also ask a question about the property on El Patio, kind of latest and greatest on that.
Yeah, so that is going to the city council meeting of August, let's see, 2nd. And that will be for final action by city council. So they will be considering the concurrent recommendations of the board and the planning commission, which are identical. And then we will also be seeking authorization to prepare an update to the historic preservation ordinance to create new penalty provisions and tighten up the permitting requirements, and that'll come back through the board, of course.
Great. Anything else? All right, moving right along. We will go to item number 3, public hearings on 84 North 3rd Street. And I believe we have some people need to recuse themselves.
If you know where the Dietrich, I can show you over there. Dietrich is probably a nice place to sit.
Oh, you do? Okay, great. Okay. Small city hall. We'll come grab you and we're all done.
Just can't forget I recused somebody in a board I was chairing and I forgot to go get them. And halfway through the meeting, we're like, oh shoot, we gotta go get Sandy back. All right. All right, so let's open our public hearing on 84 North 3rd Street, Tier 1 Historic Resource Alteration Permit. Would you have staff support, please?
So this is an application for a Tier 1 historic resource alteration permit to allow minor alteration to the J.C. Ainsley House #1, which is a landmark property located at 84 North 3rd Street. Shown on the screen here is a fairly minor change to the south elevation. Effectively, the proposal is to remove these non-original skylight features and to replace that with a period appearing dormer feature This would allow for more head clearance in the second story bathroom that would have facilitated an interior remodel of the bathroom. Your packet does include a pretty extensive review by the architect that identifies how the request is consistent with the Secretary of Interior guidelines regarding historic properties. Just in terms of background as well, just for the record, this does require board action because this is a landmark property. So because it is a landmark, as well as Alice Avenue District properties, any alteration, which is very broadly defined, does require board action to make a recommendation to the director, effectively determining whether or not it's consistent with the Secretary of Interior guidelines, as well as the City of Campbell Historic Design Guidelines for residential buildings. So based on the analysis contained in your report, staff does recommend that the board adopt a resolution recommending approval of the Tier 1 Historic Resource Alteration Permit. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And that was quite an extensive write-up there. I think I haven't seen a project with this thorough write-up since I've been on the board. So thank you for that. Any questions of staff?
Okay, well, I just want to make sure I was doing my timing correctly.
Those when we go into after discussion.
Understood. Okay, then I will wait till that discussion.
Okay.
So I want you some questions for your input.
All right, if no questions of staff, we'll open the public hearing. Would anyone of the public like to present?
Okay, I'm Barry Shillman, and my wife and I are the owners of this house that you're discussing right now. I'd just like to give you a brief background on the 3 skylights that we're replacing. Those were a mistake from the beginning. It was a compromise 40 years ago when the original architect had plans that showed there's enough room for a shower in the second floor bathroom. There wasn't. So we had to step the skylights up on a pedestal. It looks ugly from the outside. Now the skylights are difficult to operate. They're manually operated. You have to climb up on the rim of a clawfoot tub and reach up above your head and pull the handle. And that's just getting too much. And it lets all the bugs in the neighborhood come and visit. So, because we can't put screens on those windows since they pivot in the middle. So we tried to find replacement skylights, thinking that may be the way to go. They don't make that size anymore. So we'd have to reframe the roof. It wouldn't solve the headroom problem inside the bathroom. So then we just decided, just do it right. Let's just get it done and do it right and get the whole thing operating as it should. So that's just briefly why we're doing this right now.
Great. Well, that's how fancy it's going to be, a fancy shower. Any questions of the applicant?
Yes, thank you for coming here. The from how I perceive the blueprints, looking at the west exterior view, and there's a lot of blueprints that we got to see here. There's an extension being made out to the right as we're looking west. So the middle, well, yeah, the top picture there. What's the purpose of then doing that as relates to the skylights or the sky windows?
That will replace the skylights.
Okay.
And afford full headroom in the bathroom at the same time.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, applicant?
None for me.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we'll bring it back to the board. Any discussion?
I have a couple comments and just a questions particularly for your architectural expertise. But I also think it's worth noting, you know, this being the original house. So J.C. Ainsley, right? We have the Ainsley house over here. And this was the first one. And at one point he employed 750 Campbell residents throughout the Depression, which I think is pretty cool. He provided them daycare, kindergarten care, and even housing, which I think is, I think that's a great thing to note. So really, it's more of an architectural question and how this just relates to whether it be Campbell Municipal Code or the California Environmental Quality Act, the roof is being raised, right? That's how I read that. And then does that sort of trigger something as far as the rules?
So they're not raising the roof. If you look to your left and you look at the middle picture, the drawing there, so that triangular dormer element that's on the roof in the center there with the little square notes are pointing to it, they're building that right on top of the roof. So the slope of the roof is staying as is. They're just building the dormer on top of it. So if you look at the very top picture and you look at the peaks that are there, those are all like dormers coming off the existing roof plane as well. And so the middle one, again, is just a dormer. It's not exactly correct in this, what I'm about to say, but we call it California framing when you build right on top of a sloped roof. But this one is actually punching through the roof so that in the bathroom, there'll be enough headroom and so forth. Sometimes they'll build California framing on top of it and you won't be able to physically go through it. And it's just an element on the roof to make it look pretty. But this one is a functional dormer in this case here. So they're not raising the roof. They're just cutting a hole in the roof and then they will frame a vertical face that has the windows on it. And then behind that, it slopes back towards the roof and it ties into the roof. So in the very top picture, you look up at the very top and to the right, you see an element poking out to the right there. That's the dormer in the other view. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that. And again, the definition of a dormer, it's the triangular.
Yeah, I mean, it could be triangular, it could be round, it could be any kind of shape, but it refers to an element that's built on top of a roof to create that little niche.
And by definition, shouldn't a dormer though be below the adjacent ridge there though? Or is there not a hard
There's
rule?
not a hard
Oh,
rule.
okay.
I mean, you can see right now in the middle picture on the left and right hand side, you can see how the roof line makes a little step down, it steps back up. That's because the dormer / structures on either end of the house, their ridge is higher than the main ridge. And so they have that little undulation as well as extending out. So it really depends on the floor plan and where the framing occurs. So a dormer could slide down the roof and be closer to the exterior wall, and then the ridge would line up with the main roof, or it could go up like this one where it's going to be higher than that. It really depends on the positioning of it. It's all based on the slope of the roof and where that dormer intersects the structure.
Okay.
So from a code standpoint, this is all code compliant. They'll have all the drawings and everything that shows how they'll cut the hole, frame it, and do everything. We'll replace the roof section in that area there. There's nothing in any concern there. The building department will obviously review and stamp and approve and have comments, if any, related to that.
Gotcha. And the new one, we see terms like gable end gingerbread trim ornament,
Right. Yep.
which almost sounds like a holiday cookie. Painted octagonal shingle sets and the jealousy window. Like, are those going to match from one to the other, or do they even need to?
They are. If you look at the middle picture and the top picture, and you see the dormer on the very top, and the new dormer in the middle one, see how the windows are not identical, but they are complementary to each other. Oh, there you go. There's a closer view, so you can see how they complement each other, but they're not identical, because the windows in the upper one are lower in the vertical element. So there's a larger pediment that's above it. And the lower picture of the new dormer, it's not as tall of a dormer. So the windows are closer to the ridge line, but their style is complementary to the other ones.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Any other questions?
None for me.
Okay, great. Do I have a motion?
I can make a motion unless Robbie, you plan to do it.
Well, yes, I want to just get the language right. I would like to make a motion to adopt a resolution recommending approval of a Tier 1 historic resource allocation permit for the home located at 84 North 3rd Street.
Great. Do I have a second? Any discussion? Could we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Blake, Commissioner Vice Chair Walter,
Yes.
Commissioner Cordaway,
Yes.
Chair Folks.
Yes. Next. Passes 3-0. Thanks for coming down. All right, well, now we've got the band back together. Let's move on to new business. We've got a discussion of the public outreach strategy for the California Earthquake Brace and Bolt Program. And there's a staff memorandum in your packet.
Sure. This item was is brought forward by Board Blake's request. Just an opportunity for the board to discuss if and how to publicize the state's earthquake brace and bolt program that provides $3,000 grants to homeowners to seismically stabilize their homes. As I noted in the memo, some cities have websites. The state also has marketing materials that can be used by the city. So just an opportunity for you all to have that discussion. And if want to take any further action, we can document that. Thank you.
I did that program. They had been sending me emails for quite a while and I'd looked at it and gone back and forth. But when I was home, I decided I'd go ahead and do it. And it worked really smoothly. I got the work done and they reimbursed me that $3,000 really quickly. It was great. Super well done. And the guys that they sent out to do it were meticulous and did a great job. So it's in my long list of COVID activities and I'm happy with it. They did a great job.
One question I had related to it. I know that when I was living in San Jose, there were lots of people who were doing this to their homes. And there was a sense, at least in San Jose, and I don't know if it's true in Campbell, that there was a whole lot of red tape and fees associated with getting it permitted versus just doing it on the side, which so a lot of people were doing that. Is that true here?
Shouldn't be. It's a fairly straightforward and fairly expedient permit process for something like this. I believe the state also provides some basic standardized plans that can be used by some homeowners as well.
The state company did it. I don't even remember it being a problem. I would have remembered if it was antagonistic in any way. It was not. It was very easy and there was no extra red tape or anything.
The reason I brought it up initially was because I don't think very many people are aware of it, of its existence. And I thought that it would be a good outreach for us to advertise to the community. We have an awful lot of older homes. So yeah, the PR, you came up with several good suggestions, Daniel. I have no issues with any of them. Whichever one would be most appropriate. It's only offered, I believe, once a year. And so it's closed for this year. So we could decide when we want to advertise it or how we want to advertise it and when we want to advertise it.
I'm assuming it's something we can easily add to our website right now for everything else that we link. But this could be another link that takes you there. So if someone is looking through HPP, then they can see that information. At least it's there all the time. Correct?
They must have solicited me online. I don't quite remember, but I remember being well aware of it. And I also lived through the 89 earthquake in that house, and I meant to do it since then, and I hadn't. So I thought it was about time to get it done because don't want my house to fall down.
And given the small number of historic properties, we could also just mail out a brochure to all the homeowners. It's fairly nominal cost.
The state does that, right? It's their program. So it would be
It's a state program.
Okay. So it would just be a brochure of what they do and maybe a testimonial of how easy it is.
Well, I know when I sat on the Seismic Safety Commission for California, there were 0 members who had earthquake insurance. And they all said, put it into bolting and bracing your foundation and
exactly.
do not buy the insurance.
There is no need for earthquake insurance. None.
But they're all about the bolting, bracing, and sharing, and really just strengthening your house.
Especially if you have a wood frame house. You can always repair it. If you have a brick building, that's a different story.
And the benefit is received as an actual check, not a tax credit. It's actually.
They sent me real money.
That works.
I would note that the website does indicate that there does tend to be more demand than availability. So it can go into a lottery system as well, depending on how many people apply within a given year and how much money has been allocated to the program for that year.
Okay.
So maybe it's something, if it's closed for this year, that in 6 or 8 months or so, we think about it. And I do think, it might be nice to send it to the homes on the list just as hey, you're special, right? We want to make sure you see this versus a link on our website, which a lot of people probably won't.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And to be clear, it's just eligible for those houses on the historic inventory, not.
I think it's any house.
It's any home program. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I would suggest that we don't wait 6 months per se, because I don't know when the next available time slot is, that we might want to send it out sooner. So people then have time to prepare whatever they have to submit for the next time. I don't know if eligibility for 2023 is you wait till 2023, then you apply, or you can apply in 2022 to get in line for 2023.
We can take care of it fairly soon.
Yeah.
It's a small mailing.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a flashlight.
It is.
Our commercial properties. Strictly homes.
That's a good question. I don't know.
I didn't hear your question.
Are commercial properties eligible, not just residential?
I don't know.
I believe it's primarily residential. Okay, well, then we will prepare a city website, link it out to the HPP website, and then prepare a mailing to all the HRI homeowners.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for that. And we will now move on to our Mills Act Subcommittee report, which is quite extensive. Hopefully you guys have gone through it. I'll turn it over to you guys to present.
You want to start? Fair fair enough. All right, so as you all recall, we started this conversation 2020, and we've had a few meetings since then. So what I've done is in the attachment in here is this is the original document that Susan and I created that kind of broke down the different categories that we were looking at based on the current contract agreements, information, as well as various cities that we looked at to see kind of how we wanted to meld everything together. So within each item to try to make a little bit of a history here so we can follow it. There's a date and then information past the date of what was discussed both at the meetings as well as when Susan and I met. And so the bold date and bold item underneath each item is the latest item. And I'll go through each one individually, but if you see something that says item closed, no further discussion required, it's because we've already talked about that item, then there was nothing more that we needed to discuss. However, if you want to see something, want to bring it up, we can. So we obviously, Rob's a new member of the board, so he might have not, obviously was not part of some of these discussions, so we can talk about them briefly if we want to as well. But I was planning on just to kind of go through them, and then there's attachments that we were associating with each one. So with items 1 through whatever, then the attachment, I put a number next to it so we knew which that attachment is, and those are suggested write-ups, outlines, whatever for that particular category. And the idea today is to kind of go through all of it, get everyone's input, and then we can discuss the next step of how we then take this kind of outline document and start to synthesize it into a more streamlined, final, updated version. We talked a couple of board meetings ago about whether Susan and our intent was not to go in and write up a whole component for each item, but was to try to grab the big picture items of what we thought from ourselves, from the board, everybody would be appropriate for the revised section. And then the idea there is that with Daniel's assistance is, do we keep writing those in more detail, or does that now need to go to legal to then take original Mills Act outline contract, et cetera, and massage it based on our input? And then that is then further developed. We didn't want to, honestly, didn't want to spend time writing a bunch of stuff and then find out that everything is, no, can't do this, whatever. So we wanted to start big picture and work from there. So as we go through here, we can have discussion afterwards, how the next step progresses from there. So before I go into individual items, is there any big picture questions from anybody?
And for the record, we're starting on page 20 or page am I on? 39 of the agenda, correct? That attachment?
Yes, 39.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. Okay. So item 1, fees. We talked about the fee and everything. It's outlined up above. So unless someone wants to bring it up, we've kind of discussed that. It's really kind of it really needs to be generated by the city in terms of the effort that they think it's going to take, and if it needs to be changed. So we're leaving that as is. Application deadline, we talked about that we could have them appropriate due date, et cetera, et cetera. Item 3, frequently asked questions. So here's the first item, that see attached revised list. So if you scroll down to, that would be item 3, which is page 45. It says number 3, Mills Act frequently asked question. So I'm going to pass it to my partner over here. Page 45. Number 3. Yeah, so let's start.
So this is the Mills Act, item number 3, Mills Act frequently asked questions. This is pretty much self-explanatory. We had talked about this in previous board meetings. I don't know if you have or have not had a chance to read through it. There are just, I don't think there are any outstanding questions I had under it. Unless somebody else has questions, I can take questions about it, but.
If this is a document that's going to be made or an iteration of it and available to the public, would it make sense to quantify the tax savings? Because the term that's written is a significant, substantial property tax reduction. Is that worth quantifying?
Probably, that has been crunched, and so I didn't want to make it specific.
I mean, our current application package does have kind of an example illustration of how to calculate a particular homeowner's savings based off their current tax base. And maybe if I could just also just from a broader perspective. So correct, but it's still based off how much you currently owe on your annual property tax bill. So the savings pretty much varies homeowner to homeowner, depending on how much they purchase their home for and when. But the idea of this is, so board member Cordova and I still need to connect regarding the audit. But once we get that part wrapped up and we can report back to the council on the status of the current contracts, the idea is to use some of this material to explain to the council that in addition, assuming the program's working in some good capacity, that the board would like to look at expanding the program and improving it, and we can use this material to help that discussion.
And I think we can also do is, once we kind of have the audit information, is it probably wouldn't hurt to put in here that we can give some examples and say, if your house is valued at X to X, so if we say house is valued from $500,000 to $1 million, you could see a tax savings of X. If it's $1 million to $1.5 million, it's X, $1.5 million to 2. So we give them kind of a sliding scale range, which would be helpful because the whole idea of this is to get people motivated. And so if they see, hey, that's what it is, rather than having to wait to do the application, fill it out. So maybe we can do something of that where it's gives them some indication. I think that could be helpful. In fact, that was kind of one of the discussions that Susan and I had related to the audit side of going back to the city council, was giving them examples of properties, tax savings, et cetera, so that the city could see, oh, we're thinking we're losing millions of dollars in revenue, when in reality, this is how much you've actually been losing based on various price houses, things like that. Okay. Any other questions? Obviously, this is a living document. So after you've had a cocktail or two one night and you're thinking about this program and say, hey, I've got some ideas, shoot them out here. We can always add them and include them.
No, but I thought you guys did a good job of capturing, I think, the questions that would give people pause if they just look at our application online, because this really gets into the,
right.
Does this qualify? Yes or no? What do I get? What do I don't get? I think it really gets more of the nitty gritty that the kind of the overall document didn't have. So
yeah, it's not as big.
Yeah,
correct. Yeah, and a lot of cities had a lot of information that we thought was really helpful, because before you submit an application, in some cities they charge you $4,000 or $5,000. You want to really know, is this something that it's going to be worth my while and everything, and having vague information will help. So more detailed and precise we can be, I think would be helpful. All right, moving on to number 4. This is contract duration. We've had discussions over times about this last item here and back in March is this acceptable to allow for renewal and the same fee to reapply or a reduced fee? So I think the latest, what I gathered from all of us, that we were in agreement that the Mills Act is a 10-year contract, and that we're all, and you can everyone jump in. We were thinking that, okay, you sign the contract, and this day 2 of the contract, the city would then issue a non-renewal, so that the person knows that they have 10 years for that. So therefore, after 10 years, it basically comes back to the pot, and then somebody else can then apply, so that we have more opportunity, especially if we're not going to open the table, the pool for more applications. Some cities allow, everybody, so they might have 100, 200,000 applicants. We're at 8 to 10 now, I think, and 12. And so there's a way to do it. But one of the questions is it acceptable for renewal and same fee to apply or to reapply or reduce fee in the process? Because we were talking about if you did it for 10 years and then their contract ends, so on the 10th year and 1 day, can they then reapply to go for another 10 years, because they may have not either finished what they planned, even though what they planned for 10 years, but they allocated it's a 20-year process. Can they reapply, or are we all going to say 10 years and that's all. And now it goes back in and everybody else gets an opportunity.
I mean, the way I've thought about that is we want as many people to take advantage of it, but there could be some projects that are going to require so much work that we're going to say, hey, we'd rather that individual applicant get another 10 years because there's so much additional work to do on the project. But this forces them to be apples to apples, where other people who are in line who haven't gotten the Mills Act, so we can compare them, right? You can say, okay, well, this house over here has it for 10 years, but it's really important to the city that it has a ton of work that has to be done that makes no economic sense to do. But this other applicant, hasn't been able to benefit from that, and they really want to do things on that house. And then at least you have, you're not doing what we've done in the bubble, which is we just approve one person who brings us what might be a mediocre project, but it's the only one in front of us, right? So.
Well, we're in a little bit of a tough shoe. Like we were saying earlier, we don't have those many applicants available, or the actual Mills Act available. So we're kind of carving our Mills Act contract and everything with the idea that we're always going to be limited to who can apply. Most cities don't have that. Right. And so they don't have to put in the restrictions necessarily. It's like, if you apply and you are qualified based on the criteria, then you get it, and then they can decide one by one if they want 10, 15, or 20. But we're trying to say, oh, well, because we only have 2 slots open, we want to do comparisons. And you'll see this later on, like we did last year, where we had all 3 properties submit so we can do a comparison. I'm hoping at some point we're not doing that, and that we have more available, so that everybody who applies, if they are deemed qualified, then they get it, and we don't have to put themselves as well as the board in an awkward position where we're basically picking who we want to play first.
So why are we limiting them? I have a question that goes with that. Are we adding historic houses to our inventory as they come up over time? And do we have more than 130 properties total? And do we want to see those preserved? I mean, those are the questions in front of us. We're looking at a finite number of historic properties. Why are we limiting it if we want those historic properties to be preserved?
That's because
we have a very limited history.
Council is limited for us.
Right.
So
yeah, but I think the hope is, and I think my guess is the council is going to be much more interested in there are 10 homes, and we're going to give them a 10-year tax benefit to fix up their house, and all 10 get to share in the benefit, as opposed to one home gets it for 100 years and the rest don't get it all. My hope is that with that kind of system, they're going to say, hey, we should have more of these, because they're not really, the current system is a winner and a loser, right? And this to me is you can have a lot more winners. And with that, and if I think we can show the cost to the city is compared to the value of the property in the neighborhood, the cost to the city is fairly small. The cost is mostly of the state and the county. And it has these really tangible benefits, which right now, as we know, because we haven't really audited these people, hopefully everyone's done a great job and invested and done all the right things. But if we find they haven't, then I think it's going to be harder for us to get more of them without saying we've got a really tight program, and a 10-year is a relatively quick amount of time for if you're renovating an old house, right? So I think that's the hope.
Yeah.
So that by the time the 10 years has come, we'll have a bunch more of these to give out. At least, maybe not as many historic homes as we have, but it might be. Well, for example, I'm just making this up, but you might say, okay, how many landmarks do we have? Okay, we should have at least that many Mills contracts, because if we're going to say it's a landmark house, which is, as those of us who live in them know, there's a whole lot of rules on you, then the city should at least give them an opportunity, if they so desire, right, to do this. And it's not that they definitely get one, right, because all the historic houses are not going to compete for them, but at least there's some rationale of, yes, we want to preserve houses, so we're at least going to tag it to some number besides 8 or 6 or 4 or right.
Well, I think too, if we go with what we're doing right now, where we're trying to curtail it around the fact that there might be competing interest in it, that doesn't mean that if a whole bunch of people apply, or the pool opens up and the city goes, okay, we're going to allow 20 or 30 or more, then those restrictions would go away because it only applies when there's only one spot left and everyone's competing for it. So we're kind of designing it initially for that worst case scenario with the hopes that over this next year, when we do the audit and other information, the city council might say, oh, wow, that was not as bad as we thought. Yes, we want to add 10 more, 20 more or whatever. So again, we'll have this there that if it ever shrinks in the future, it's in our agreement. But if it's open, then we're good to go. So we're trying to avoid having to come back and change all of this in another 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years. Is try to set it, and then that gives us flexibility through the life of everything. I think too, the 10-year one, I'm in favor of it also because, to be honest, it puts a little pressure on the homeowner to then focus on the 10 years. So then we get the homes repaired a little sooner. You know, so if they're really serious about it, then they're going to apply for it. They're going to work the 10 years, get it done. Then we're having homes that are safer, protected earlier, rather than a house that's on it for 20 or 25 years and they're taking a long time to do it. So there's pros and cons for everything. Okay, so are we all generally in agreement that we're still going to go with the 10 years, and then if they come back, they can reapply, and if they deem qualified for the next 10 years, then they will be accepted just like anybody else? Seem reasonable? You agree?
Well, in addition to wearing the exact same shirt that Mike's wearing, I agree. How'd that happen? You know, I do think, you know, the longer period, and I think 10 years is a fine amount of time, provided you're not making changes at year 9 and 10, because, you know, you can amortize the cost of what you do. You don't have to claim it all in 1 year. So, you know, in year 7, you can have, you know, an amount that you amortize over the next 3 years, which is, you know, less of a cost tax receipt wise to the city per year, and you can kind of flatten it out. And I think 10 years is a pretty decent number for that. And then that's my opinion on that.
Okay. All right, moving on to item 5. Yeah, I said item closed. This is all homes have to be part of the HRR registry. So that's pretty straightforward. Number 6, approval process.
On that point, though, it might be worthwhile to consider whether or not the Mills Act program could be used as an inducement to get properties onto the list. I mean, there are a number of potential properties that are on the potential list, some of which may qualify, not necessarily all of them, but this may be a way to kind of address that issue.
Correct. And we did have some, you know, years ago, we did have some functions and outings at the Ainsley property where we invited everybody to come. And there were a few people who were, if I remember right, just purchased a home or were interested in everything. But outside of that, it's still been very limited people till this last year. All of a sudden we had 3 homes, 4 homes all at the same time looking for it. Exactly. But yes, it's definitely the whole idea. This whole thing is trying to gear it to an incentive to show them, hey, tax savings and all these benefits and et cetera for that too.
I believe I mentioned this at the last meeting, but I'm going to repeat it. I've been in contact with 3 separate property owners who are very interested in getting the Mills Act. And I said, okay, you're going to have to wait. We're not there yet. We have to get an audit going. And there are no Mills Acts available right now. And when the audit is complete and the city council decides they'll grant us more Mills Acts, then I encourage you to apply. And they're all worthy homes that could certainly use the Mills Act. So,
well, I think to your point, Daniel, this whole, when we're able to refresh this, hopefully get city council buy into augmenting the number, and that's going to give us kind of a great starting point to start our PR marketing for this whole thing and start to do outreach and everything. Say, hey, got the new program and here's all the benefits, and the city has now added 5 or 10 more. Right now, it's hard to go out and say, hey, sign up when 5 years from now, if we have one available, or 10 years from now. So you kind of are stuck in a hard spot there.
Well, and as I understand too, the Mills Act really matters when you're a new homeowner, because if you're under Prop 13 and assuming prices have gone up, your Prop 13 kind of protects you equally to the Mills Act. So it's kind of, if you had your house for a while, it's kind of 6 one half dozen the other. Yeah.
Yeah, the frequently asked.
Yeah. And I think what happens is, at least since I've been on this board, we keep seeing people who buy a house in Campbell and it's on our list. And the first thing I want to do is take it off the list and demolish it. Right. And so, to me, if we had this at the ready, like, hey, don't demolish it and don't try to get off the list. Here's this thing. And we have enough. So it's actually a benefit, not a pie in the sky benefit.
Exactly. Yep.
A lot of people don't know about it, and it would be nice to be able to offer it and sell it. Oh, thank you. It does make a difference. It makes a huge difference. It makes a difference between wanting to demolish it and not wanting to demolish it. It also helps people who do love old houses to buy an old house and fix it up, rather than buy an old house and apply for a demo permit.
All right, moving on to number 6, approval process. So our last was, this item does not require a scoring sheet. It just requires a written statement that outlines the approval process and anticipated duration of time for each step, so the applicant understands how long the process may take. And so this is number 6, and I think we had a item related to this, which is, so on page 47 is kind of a draft of, actually it's 47 and 48. One is a written description of kind of the process where it outlines the application, pre-inspection, public hearing, and then we can put some dates in here. Right now we're showing XXX days or weeks, so that again, they have an idea, hey, the day I submit this, I can anticipate, hopefully if everything goes as planned, 6 months from now, a year from now, whatever. Right now we don't have that, so people don't know. It's kind of like if you're going after a building permit or a CUP or any other process with the city. Sometimes they give you a duration. I know City of San Jose says 7 months for a CUP process. So at least when you look at it, you go, oh, I better plan for 7 months. If I get early, great. I think it'd just be helpful. So whether we do a written description or we just have this graphic, and I borrowed this from a one that we found that just basically visually shows you what the process is. So either one could be something that we included. Or both. It could be both if it's whatever seems the most helpful for the applicants to understand the process.
And I'll add to that, this is a blind spot across the whole planning side of things, just in terms of process. I mean, this is something that we've discussed internally of trying to be more illustrative of what that planning review process looks like, the time between hearings and which bodies you need to go to, because it is not very clear for the layperson. So we do recognize that as just a general fix we need to address one day.
You guys can borrow this if you want. And there's no license on this. So I don't know if anybody had any questions on this item.
No, I think it's good. I know that just because of the way calendaring works, right? It's like, you know, oftentimes the planning commission will meet right behind us. And so like, if you get through us and you got to wait for the next one, and that takes a while, and they wait for the next city council, and it's a long process. And I don't know, and this is really up to those other two bodies, but, you know, I mean, obviously the council makes the ultimate recommendation, but if the planning commission were more of like you're on a consent agenda, absent somebody pulling it off, or something where it's just like I just, because this to me looks like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna spend 6 months waiting around for this piece of paper to go through the process, and it'd be nicer if there were a faster way to do it. But I mean, again, that's kind of beyond our control. It'd be nice if, I mean, it just seems like there's a lot of scrutiny for something that hypothetically we have it ratcheted down so much that seems to me this board really is the one making the recommendation, but is doing the work. And the other ones to me should be pro forma, right? Unless we do something wrong.
Yeah, like, I don't, to be honest, if we, in all the previous ones where we say, yes, the Mills Act is great, we recommend it going on forward, I'm assuming most of the time planning has basically rubber stamped it. There hasn't been a lot of scrutiny from their side, right?
Sorry, from the city council?
No, from planning, when it goes to planning.
Well, planning commission actually has no role in Mills Act review. It goes directly from HPB to city council.
So it just goes from HPB directly to city council.
Right. Well, this number 4 can be taken off your list.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I thought there was a planning step in there that had to go to planning.
No, that's to get on or off the list. That does involve planning commission, but the Mills Act itself, the way it's currently structured, it does not.
All right, so you just saved a step. There we go.
Just did it.
Perfect. Right, boom.
All right, so we'll say remove.
No, I too, just, I mean, in terms of in the future, I mean, ideally, I mean, all this is right now just, it's not codified in the city zoning code.
Correct.
So the procedures will in the future be codified. So it'll be very clear who requires what review process, and, you know, maybe we can look at ways to speeding that up in the future.
Okay. All right, moving on to item 7, requirements, conditions of approval. See attached proposed list of acceptable items, and that is on page 49. Susan, you want to weigh in on this one?
Sure, if you get a chance to find it. It's pretty self-explanatory. It starts off with just qualifying projects must be related to exterior work only unless otherwise noted below. So we tried to separate it out into structural integrity. Oh, whoop, okay. 2 primary categories, structural integrity, and some examples of what those would be, and exterior architectural integrity and examples of what they would be. And then there's a secondary category, which would include insulation, heating, air conditioning, protected trees. This is something I thought we needed to discuss further because, as I recall, Chair Folks, you were talking about whether this should be included, or because we had the tree ordinance, it wasn't necessary to be part of the Mills Act. But we need to talk more about that. And then interior work that constitutes a life and safety issue. So unless somebody has questions, just take a look at it and tell me whether you think it's good to go or not.
Yeah, for me, I like all of the structural integrity. Some of the architectural integrity, the ones that would have the question marks, I kind of, I agree that, you know, my worry is I've not seen a lot of historic driveways in Campbell or any place. Fences and gates, you know, again, if they're, I think they're, to me, I might take those off here because there may be a case where they are useful, but if I'm looking at this, right, you know, I mean, just take my house, you know, I could park 30 cars on the asphalt in my driveway. So like, if I could say, boy, I can replace all that asphalt, that'd be awesome, right? And that wouldn't be historic at all. So my worry is that the other things seem like they are, by their definition, historic.
I may suggest that we keep porches and then maybe we just give a little bit more description because there's, you know, if it's falling down or the railings and elements like that. But I agree. That's the other elements, we can have those removed. Okay. All right.
And then with the trees, you know, again, so the tree ordinance to me does not, it tells you can't cut things down, but it basically doesn't give you any requirements to maintain them. And we have a lot of these, you know, a lot of these old houses, also these old trees that are super expensive to maintain without having them fall down one day. So to me, it seems like if you're going to have to do $50,000 of tree work, which some of these properties probably have, you know, and they don't have $50,000 to spend, to me, if they were putting out an application, that would be a positive because that's right. The trees are historic and they can't cut them down, but they can just let them stay there till they fall, and it's an act of God, and they don't pay anything, and the neighbors have to pay to get the tree off their roof, right? So, not that has ever happened to my house. Just once. Took out 3 yards. Yeah, everything, furniture, everything. Tree, the entire yard's gone.
Of your neighbor?
Yeah, 3 neighbors. Yeah, so trees can be a problem.
Okay.
So you're suggesting to keep it as part of the Mills Act.
The potential.
As something you can put as what you want to do. I'm going to, I have these 400-year-old oak trees and I want to have them girdered and cabled. And
okay. All right. Moving on to item 8. Item 8, priority consideration. Develop priority items 1, 2, and 3. And I don't know why I have that. I thought I did something on there. Let's see.
I don't know.
Oh, so if you go, so if you scroll down to number 8 on page 50, This is the application supplemental form number 1 that's already in our document. And then I added some notes above here about additional items to consider. Items that include roofing, foundation, etc., landmark properties not in a designated historic district, unique structures, or one of a kind as elements that are part of the priority list. And then we scroll down to page 52, Mills Act ranking information. This is from what Daniel created last year when we were having to do the comparison of other properties. So I put these in here as all examples of how we can fine tune this item, and looking for feedback from everybody. Go. Now, again, as I was saying earlier, this is more geared towards if we, I guess, we can use it for 2 ways. One, if on any normal occasion where we have multiple applications available, we're still using as a priority to see, hey, do they fall into what we're looking for? Yes or no, as well as, hey, we only have 1 slot open and 5 people have applied for it. Then we would use this in a more kind of stricter fashion to do comparisons like we did a year ago or so.
The ranking metrics that are part of this, were they borrowed from another program that exists, or did we come up with that?
The matrix itself, I created the last year because we had more applications than enough Mills Act slots. So that was the first time you ever had that scenario occur. But the actual criteria were generated by the board in the past as part of the creation of the Mills Act program, and that's part of the packet.
If you look at on, so like I said, on page 55 and 51, those are from the current Mills Act Property Tax Incentive Program. And then on page 52, the criteria, this was what Daniel synthesized for last year. And we had this criteria with points because we were trying to figure out points. So down on the bottom of the page, you see if you get 90 to 100%, you get X amount of points, et cetera. And that's how we kind of did a comparison. But the topic of each one, if I remember right, those 4 topics were still the same that was previously in our Mills Act. We just then turned it into a criteria point system to then do that. So we were trying to make sure we weren't creating something totally new for the applicants to say, well, wait a minute, you're changing the rules. Kept the rules, we now just tried to make it in a more streamlined fashion. So then on page 53 was the same thing. It's just now in a chart form so that we can put in our points when we were scoring everything to show what we felt each property was. And then we had a meeting and we compared all our notes, and then we said, oh yes, we all agree. And that's how we selected the applicants.
Yeah, so to me, the 52 and 53 are more board facing than public. And if we want to have them on the website so the public can see what we're working off of, that's fine. I'm trying to minimize, I mean, the applicant, there's a lot of paperwork here already, right? So I'm trying to kind of, so if you give them transparency to this, but you say this is what the board will be using as a guideline,
right,
then hopefully when they're doing their applications, they'll read through this and say, oh, I need to focus on these things.
Right.
I mean, I'll offer too, though, that, I mean, this spreadsheet was necessary because the current program is a bit open-ended. It's very broad in terms of what's eligible. And so you had applications kind of touching different pieces of it. So we needed some way to objectively review all those applications at one time. But if the future program is more prescriptive, which is kind of what the earlier discussion was alluding to about tiering specific improvements, it probably is less necessary to rank them this way, because you now are saying, well, these things are the most important. So we've taken the universe of potential improvements and very much narrowed it down to those critical structural life safety aspects. So I'm hoping in the future, we won't necessarily have to engage in that level of kind of subjective decision-making as we had to last year.
And like I said, I agree, we might have just language that says if at any point in the program, if more applicants are vying for spots that are less, that the city uses this system, blah, 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 and it's an appendix. So it's just there so they can just see, so they're not, oh, surprised day one when all of a sudden they're competing against their neighbor and they see this chart, they're like, where's that come from? That they, at least it's all transparent.
Awkward situation.
All right, so then moving on to number 9, rehabilitation maintenance work plan. Develop work plan outline similar to the document the city gave to the current Mills Act contracts to fill out for the audit. This is on page, so you go to page 9, which is or item 9, page 54. This is just an application of supplemental work form that just shows the work task, type of work, year commenced, everything that they're supposed to provide. So again, we can tweak this plan as this form as we see fit, but it's to provide all that information so that we in the city can see what they're planning on doing.
So this is on the audit side after, or this is the before side?
Application.
It's part of the application. Yeah, so this application showing, which they're having to do now. But I know when the audit happened, we sent out, the intern sent out a form, but when everyone submitted everything back, they didn't all follow the form. They read different things. So we want to be more precise and say, hey, here's the form you fill out. Here's the background information and all backup information that you have to provide, et cetera, et cetera. So we have really apples to apples across the board when we're doing the review, as well as comparing it in the 5 years when we're doing an inspection and things like that. So unless anybody has more discussion, we thought that was pretty straightforward of just making sure we have clear documentation. That's.
I want to give them more space to write.
Okay.
double space it,
Yes,
so that they can
right,
actually
exactly.
put the work task is going to be hard to fit in that
Yes.
line.
All right, number 10, oversight accountability. Will the city and HPP require a form for this step, or is a description in the application adequate? So this is part of the kind of some cities require pre-inspection as part of the application process. Most cities require annual reports from the owner. We suggest a pre-inspection annual report and photos, et cetera, et cetera. So the question here is just, will the city and us require a specific form for this step, or are we just asking them to do a write-up at each of those intervals? And I don't know more, I guess it's maybe more of a question for you, Daniel, in terms of run down the road. Is it to, again, make it apples to apples? Do we give them carte blanche to how they want to respond? Or do we say, hey, fill out this form so it's something that you document?
I mean, I would think that ideally in the future, we'll have a much more specific work plan, and that can be tailored in terms of the annual report. So here's your work plan. What did you get done this year?
Right.
And we kind of just go through that process with all the contract holders every year. And so that will vary necessarily because they all will have different work plans.
Right.
And that keeps them.
Yeah, so if they work plan with 10 items, then if they respond just on a letterhead on their own, dear planner, blah, 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 items 1, 4, 9, whatever, these are what we completed in 5 years. Here's the backup receipts. Here's all the information. That's enough. Or do you see something more detailed?
I mean, that probably would be sufficient. I mean, I think obviously there's been an area of improvement for us in terms of monitoring these contracts over time. And I think we probably need to deploy more technology. I mean, a lot of this has to do with so many people just touching the program over time and loss of institutional memory every time somebody leaves. And all this has just been on paper records everywhere. And we cleaned out one of our offices 2 weeks ago. And I found a folder of just Mills Act notes and records dated 2013 that had just been sitting in a cabinet all these years. And so I think we need to get away from that. So we have a pretty advanced electronic permitting system that we are kind of pushing the boundaries of in any number of ways to just help us keep organized and maintain records over long periods of time, well past the tenure of any individual staff members. So I think trying to roll kind of the annual review process into our permit software somehow would probably be useful. I haven't really figured out how we can do that, but I have some thoughts. But I think technology and getting away from just paper will be helpful.
Yeah,
in a lot
and
of ways.
I'm assuming if you're doing the pre-inspection, you know, a camera's worth 1,000 words of writing, right? You can just say, okay, here's a picture of the roof, here's a picture of the porch and the right part, here's a picture of the windows that are broken. And if you just have those on a server with that application someplace, right, then when you're going back and looking at it there, I mean, that, you know, to me, all the receipt stuff is important to show, you know, show their work. But I do think that here's what the house looked like, here's what it looks like now. In some ways, that will probably meet the intent of this more than anything else.
Correct. And as I'm thinking about it, I think our permit software could probably be set up in such a way that the contract holders would have an open permit file that would allow them to upload materials when their 1 year due date comes up. And the software allows for automatic reminders so that when the reminder has been 1 year, the entire planning staff is informed, and then whoever's responsible for it, either me or my successor, would then follow up with the contract holders, and then they can upload the materials directly to the website portal. So all that material stays electronic and dated, time-stamped, and we could probably generate reports. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff we can do with this technology. We just need to build it out a little more for this purpose, but
we're not there yet.
We're not there yet. Yeah, I mean, I think the administrative side really has to follow the actual program creation. Because what we're really talking about is effectively scrapping the current program and rebuilding it. Right. And so that's the legislative effort that eventually needs to get done and approved by the city council. And once that part is done, then it's the actual administration of the new Mills Act program that then will deal with this.
Well, and again, this item could be written in such a way that it gives the city and the homeowners flexibility. So it could say currently provide this may change, subject to change to an all online process or whatever. And go from there. Okay. All right, item 11, what features is the contract cover? I would say here, item closed, it relates to item 7. So see item 7, which we've already discussed. Number 12 is an architectural engineering report required. This item relates to item 7, add verbiage under item 7 to address this condition. And we talked about before that, yes, we all agreed that if they're doing something significant enough, then they need to provide a report as part of their application. Or I think we talked about that they can state, hey, we have these issues. If we're accepted, then we will provide that report. So they don't have to spend $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 to do a report, to submit it as part of the application. And if it's rejected, they just wasted this money. So it's giving them, the homeowners a little bit of leeway to do that. But in the end, if the report is required because they're doing foundational work or something, then they can provide that information.
I mean, I would point out there's always some degree of risk. I mean, if a homeowner indicates that they're planning to spend X thousands of dollars on a certain amount of work, only to find out it's not actually required, then they entered into a contract where they may not necessarily be able to exercise all of its cost savings. So I know it's a little bit chicken or the egg thing, but.
Right, and it might be that we, again, in this description, it might be that the owner submits the application, documents as necessary, any information, blah, blah, blah. And then it might be a step 1 application approval process where the city goes, okay, we're approving you, but before we can sign contracts, you need to provide this information. No, not really different than submitting a set of plans and they say, hey, before we're going to give you a permit, here's the things that you need to submit. They submit this documentation. If it's all acceptable, then they send out the contracts and everybody goes from there. So I'm sure that something could be worked out.
Yeah, but I'm thinking to Daniel's earlier point about the fact that we're really narrowing the criteria and doing very expensive items, right? I think it's going to be, I'm not worried. I mean, we had people before who were saying, I'm going to polish my floors and I'm going to plant some flowers and I'm going to put a chandelier. Like, we're getting rid of all that. So we're going to have something that's going to be like, I have to put a new roof on, or I have to take all the siding off. That's, or the foundation. So I have a sense that whether you have the architectural engineering drawings or not, I'm not worried about, if the scope of work is that large, I'm not worried about it costing them less in the end of the day, because my guess is we're really going to be focusing on these projects that really are, they need the Mills Act, right? That it will not be economic for them otherwise. But I think if they have it, that's good for them, right? If they have the drawings, that's going to make their application that much better. But I agree with you. I hate to have something where I'm only going to fix this if I get a Mills Act, but I don't want to spend the money on the architect or the engineer until I get it. Because if I don't get it, I'm not going to do the work, right? We'll just wait till the house falls down.
Yeah. All right. Move on to number 13, maximum number of contracts awarded per year. We discussed I'd like to increase the allowed number of contracts, but the city will ultimately decide how many will be allowed. So this will be something that's not necessarily, again, I don't know if we need to codify, it won't be codified in this document per se. Although some cities they identify how many, but I don't know if it's in their actual code, if it's more just a description on the website that blah, blah, blah. So it's just, this will be to be determined. All right, pre-application workshop requirement, item closed, we've decided that was not necessary. Item 15, item closed, we discussed it, yes, electronic submittal, what Daniel was talking about, we're all going that way. Application package checkoff list. Yes, review current 2014 checklist and update accordingly. So again, we'll have that list. I think I included one in here for reference, just so we can see. Or did I? No, I did not. I just stated that. So we'll have that updated in the final one. Then oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong number. 16. You're right. Yeah. So on page 55, that's the current program that identifies kind of a checklist to help the owner see everything that they need to submit. And I had some additional items. Here's a question mark termite condition report to the insurance report within 3 to 6 months of new ownership, or question marks, as we saw that somewhere that I can't remember where. I remember reading that one of the cities required a title insurance report as part of it, but I don't know. It's more of a city contractual question, is if you need that or if you need anything else. But anyways, that would be a list that we will update and include in the final one too. So that's number 16.
I'm glad we're making sure people submit color photographs. Suppose all those black and whites that people are taking nowadays.
I don't know. You never know. What's that?
Of the termites, color photos of the termites.
Well, no, I was just thought that was, I think that language has probably been around for a while.
Yes, on the list.
No,
Says,
It's like,
all right, number 17, attachments. We recommend including the following items, documents, and how we select applicants, priority consideration, worksheet, ranking, matrix, what we talked about earlier. That could be an appendix. And B, project list that includes the cost versus tax savings, similar form that was included in the June 21st meeting agenda. And then Mills Act contract, so that people can see what's in the contract, understand what they're going to be signing and everything for that. And then number 18, other was include a copy of the Mills Act contract so applicants review this. I have a note here under 312.22. This is also, should we limit the tax savings allowed per year? City of Oakland has this requirement and it is $25,000 per year. City of Monrovia requires an electrical safety inspection. Should we require this? And the last item I have here, in addition to above, we recommended a penalty to properties in the HR that purposely modify their structures such that the structures lose its historic quality and is removed from the HRI. Similar language should be included in the Mills Act contract. That last one, we should all know why I put that there from the recent events.
I mean, the law already has a penalty provision for a Mills Act contract that's pretty steep. If I recall, is 9% of property value. So it can be very costly for homeowner.
But for what? If they breach of contract?
Breach of contract, and breach of contract is very broad, but it would basically include doing unpermitted alterations to your home.
Right.
I mean, with the other situation, we don't have a Mills Act contract, so we have nothing to fall back on other than the code, which is somewhat lacking. But with the Mills Act contract, it's a much more stringent bar. You are acknowledging that you understand it's a historic house and you can't do certain things without proper approval and permits. And so not getting those permits or approvals would be very much a violation of your contract.
Does it say that, or is it more just a breach of contract? Does it get that
I
detailed?
believe it does say that, and I believe it also does indicate the specific penalty percentage because that does come from the government code.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wouldn't put a cap on it. I mean, I don't know why Oakland's doing that, but I think they have a lot more too in Oakland. But I mean, my view is I'd rather have people get a big tax benefit, do all the work, get it done in 10 years and be like, hey, we're finished. Here's somebody else can take this over, right? And especially because the city pays very little of that, right? That's mostly county and state.
All right, so that is our report. So any additional items that we should be adding to it? And then the final question is, what is our next step from here?
Audit.
Well, there's audit, but there's also
But
all
he's a
this.
subcommittee. He's got a report. Are you warm? Are you really warm?
I mean, the air is not on.
Yeah, but like, you want to sit down here? Oh, there's one here?
Yeah.
Well, it's not gonna hit you. Okay.
You want a bottle of water?
You can take your jacket off. It's okay.
Well, I mean, I think to me, this is really, I mean, these are all the things we set out to try to answer. So I guess the question is for Daniel, what more can we do to help get this in a form that's going to be hopefully?
I mean, I think I could take it from here, but again, as a reminder, I mean, creation of a whole Mills Act program, creation of an ordinance very much is a work plan item. So that's going to be a prioritization question for the city council. Really a year, 9 months from now, when they are addressing next year's budget, when they set next year's work plan. And as Rob can maybe speak to, next year's work plan will likely involve a lot of major planning code updates. So that'll be kind of a department prerogative and with council approval, whether or not this can be dealt with in the near term.
Well, I just wanted to say, I was appreciative that you really took on the role of an acting commission. I staff a lot of commissions at the county. I haven't seen one this active before. So I'd say admirable work for the work you had done. I'd say take it as far as you can, and we'll have to check in between staff resources we have at the council and see where we can go. I can't commit anything at this point, but I was impressed by how far you've taken it. I just keep going at this point.
All right, then in terms of next steps, as I noted, board member Cordaway and I still need to connect. So I will try to get something in the books the next few weeks and see where we are. Unless we want to provide any additional update.
So I've just emailed everybody a 100-page document where I'd like to go through line by line. Just kidding.
Show off.
No, the update is. So I've been trudging through the document. So, and I'm going through these long PDFs that have tons of receipts on them and sort of, just the commitment that I have to Rob and Daniel is, to have that to them next week, just so that, we can make sure we're looking at this appropriately. Lots of granularity, which is great that we're receiving, from the residents. There are multiple projects in multiple years for each property. So there's some layers there. They claim from like $20,000 of total, work to like $200,000. And there's a lot of, there's good detail, like, termite services, dry rot repair. Then you get stuff like miscellaneous repairs, that I need to flag. And there's a good number also of pictures that are provided. which is good. Some are in black and white. And so, yeah, there's a lot of detail there, and most of it, is very helpful. And I have yet to see anything, egregious, like I want to put in a steam room and, claim that, or a hot tub or anything like that. So I like the idea of, what you were talking about as far as an electronic means for residents wanting to upload it. If you find a file with all these receipt, paper in it and receipts, that means, hopefully we can, do away with that. But so you will have your update, or you'll have the completed package with all details next week, and I'll provide a summary as well, so that gives us enough time for next month's meeting, to provide a summary, if not recommendations.
And with regard to recommendations, I think one question that will need to be asked of the council, and they'll probably want to hear the board's opinion, is as to the existing contracts, should they be terminated in 10 years? Because at some point, they will run out of things to do. And so these will be legacy contracts that need to be addressed. And that question probably should be asked sooner than later if we're going to be trying to build a new program.
Yeah, I mean, my thought on that is that because we're going to be doing that going forward, that if we do that with everyone, but with the provision that, hey, you are eligible just like everyone else to reapply for your same contract, that, all that really does is say, if they have a superior project that really deserves to continue, but as you know, for some of these, they've been going on forever, and my guess is the audit's going to show kind of a diminishing return. And of course, we all want to have tax savings. So I'm sure they all are not going to be happy with that outcome. But I just do think it's, especially with the meager program we have, right? I don't think we can afford to just have people kind of like winning the lottery, on the tax side.
The largest number of continuous years I've seen projects being done on a single resident is like 4 years. So it's not like people are doing stuff every year. But what you could do then, though, is amortize those costs over a 10-year period. But as far as the work, it's more condensed. That's what I'm finding.
So what you're suggesting is that with the properties that we currently have, sending out a notice saying, all right, your 10 years is now up, and so that you get your contract until the 10-year ends. Because if you're, like you said, if they're in year 4 of their 10, we put a notice right now, then is it still go 10 years? It still goes 10 years, but I can't remember. If someone is in their 4th year of a contract and then we say, okay, we're terminating it, does it terminate at 10 years, so 6 more years, or is it 14 years?
It's still 10 years out.
So it's once you say no.
So I think we tell them no tomorrow.
now.
They still have 10 years,
years.
which is the most that anyone's going to have.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
they're not losing out on anything.
Yeah, and I agree.
Correct. And I believe, if the council does give the direction to file notice of non-renewals, they do have appeal rights to the council. So they could also go to the council individually and say, I would like more time because of X, Y, or Z, and the council could grant that on a case-by-case basis.
So that would give people 10 years from when they're notified.
Correct. Okay. And we'll certainly, just going back in terms of the cost differential, I mean, I imagine we would amortize the cost over the current duration of the contract, and we'll pull numbers from the finance department and the county assessor to understand how much money they've saved, so we can understand the delta between what's been saved versus what's been spent per property.
Great. Well, that's a lot of work. Thank you, both of you, and thank you, Rob, for taking over this next phase. So I'm very excited. We're looking, I could see the end of the tunnel, right? It's well, it's still a ways out, but it's over there. See, all we need is a law student who wants to take this on as a legal project to write this ordinance up and then hand it to Daniel. Then we'd be all set, right? So I could contact my alma mater and see if there's anyone teaching public administration class or something.
Yeah. Incidentally, I believe we've actually had a couple of planners as part of their master's thesis projects have actually done code updates in the past, long ago past.
Well, it's worth poking around. Free labor is always good. All right. So I think we're finished that item. So we will move to adjournment. Our next regular scheduled meeting is July 27th, 5 p.m. here. Do we know, Daniel, are there things already on the agenda there, or is it too early to tell?
Other than the Mills Act discussion, there are no regularly scheduled items.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Well, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.